In the following tutorial, I'll be showing a rough idea of how I set up Corona volumetrics depending on case by case. In this situation, what I wanted to do was try to implement the volumetrics into an environment that I shot that already had fog at night. So with this technique, it's not so much as isolating where the fog goes as adding a general fog to the whole shot and then being able to play with lights that diffuse amongst the fog as they would in real life. So with that said, let's get started. The 3D model that I'm using is a free McLaren model provided by uh, on Gumroad. It's the render guy, and on Behance is Thomas F. This is a wonderful model. It's free. It's fantastic. The quality is fantastic, and smoothing is good. There's no weird pinches or anything from what I've seen. And for the front end shot that we're doing, this works amazing. So anyhow, show your support, go get it. And then also, of course, he has other models for sale, and the quality is fantastic on all of them. So support the local community. Anyhow, so that's the model we are using. Again, free model. You can get it from him on his Gumroad or his Behance, which is a direct link to the Gumroad. And then the backplate HDRI I'll be using is one that I shot in the street of my neighborhood. So if you just go to gumroad/CGI place, it's the first one on the list. It's free. There's a $1 charge because the Gumroad I didn't purchase, so they make me have to have it $1 or more. So all you have to do is use the coupon code Corona Render, and that makes it 0. So this is free. It comes with several backplates for you to choose from and an HDRI at 8,000 pixels wide. So with that said, let's get started. Here's the car. I have prepped it roughly, nothing crazy, just to have a starting point to work with. And at this point, it's as far as you want to take it with the prep work. For me, it's kind of just to be able to start working on the tutorials, so it's not really crazy dialed in, all the little orange peel details. I didn't go that nuts with it. I threw some materials on there just so it looks presentable and we can work as a template. Anyhow, with that said, first things first is to choose the backplate to work with. I'm going to be using the DSC0135, and then there's multiple ways of getting the camera information. The way I have my display set up is I have it all on the right hand side, but you could also right click and go to properties. If you go to the details on the bottom, they should have all the camera specs, and I always leave this in all my shots, so you should be able to get that. Now the f-stop, ISO, shutter speed, all that stuff is, because we're in CGI, it doesn't really matter because you could put in whatever numbers you want and make it work. So this is all, it's still in here, but I wouldn't really stress about it to try to recreate it in the CGI space. All you really need is to know what lens we're using. And here it's a 35mm. So anyhow, first things first, I set up a physical camera, and because I want this to be a dead-on front view type of shot, I'm just putting it in the front, changing the focal length to 35, and then again, this stuff doesn't really matter, so I'm just going to do 200, and f8, I'll leave at f8. If you do real depth of field, then of course the aperture kind of matters, but then it will blur your background, so you kind of have to find a workflow that works for you when it comes to using depth of field and whatnot. So anyhow, with that said, we have our camera created. Now we're going to implement the backdrop into the viewport. So all we will do is I'm holding Alt, press B, opens up the dialog box. And what I'm going to do is kind of like zero to hero this tutorial. So if you don't know anything really about 3D Max, this will kind of give you a head start in it. So if you already are very educated in it, you can fly through it or skip through it just to get to the part that you want to research. But for those that don't know, I will be kind of mentioning the keyboard shortcuts I use to kind of help you get an idea of what I'm doing. So then I'm going to go to Use Local Files, click on the Files tab, and 135, press Open. There we go, now to my viewport background. Now what I am going to do is press F10 and make sure my aspect ratio is 1.5. That's what my camera sensor spits out. So all my backdrops are always 1.5. So the size of the render doesn't really matter as long as the aspect ratio is 1.5. That way the backplate doesn't stretch or distort. Anyhow, with that said, here we go. Now, first things first is to set up the road that the car sits on. If I remember correctly, the width of my street is about 24 feet wide. I apologize with the measurement units. I know a lot of you guys will be using the metric system, but I'm doing the standard because I'm in the States. So anyhow, I'm gonna make it about 24 feet wide, and then this really is just, it's more of a reference for perspective. So then I move it all the way back. So there we go. So now I have my road that the car is going to go on, and let's see here, 10, 20, 24, 28. I'm going to make it 28 feet wide because I was thinking if there's two cars parked, I could still squeeze on through. A typical lane in the US is 9 to 10 feet, so 9 times 3 is 27, so 28 feet. All right, so here we go. So now I have the width set up. Now my camera, again, it's kind of here. This is going to be the hero. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the plane and just isolate it. And that's me clicking on this little button right here, this little light bulb. This isolates your selection. So now this is how I set up my perspectives with a lot of my shots. I don't really do camera matching like the tool you could use in 3D Max. I just eyeball it. So holding Control and press R enables the rotation of the camera. And now all you do is tweak your camera until the lines just start to match up in your viewport. Now what you can do is you could add more segments to the road to make sure that these match up. Now I'm going to do Edit Poly on top. I'm going to connect right here and right here. And so this way I know how to rotate to make sure these things match up. In theory, if you are working to scale and your lens is accurate, you should be able to get a very, very good match in CGI space according to the backdrop. Now, one thing that is happening is this pavement has a slight curve to it. And I'm not adding anything like that into my shot because then we'll have to adjust the tire, car rotation, all that. So as you can see, this line does bend and bow a little bit. So I'm just gonna kind of take it with a grain of salt, get it to the best of my ability. I feel like this is something I'm comfortable with right here. So there we go. We have our car set up. So now the trick that I use if I want to move the car forward or back is once I have my road set up, I'll take my camera and I link it to the ground. So I'm linking it to the ground plane. Now what this allows me to do is I'll also change the pivot point to be kind of like up here. Now I could move this plane, which moves the environment, but it doesn't move the car. So, and with this model, it's great. You know, it's a user model, so it's fine. But if you work in the automotive business and you get engineering data, what happens is sometimes they'll send you a wrong model, and then they'll send you a new part. So like, let's say they send you a new front bumper. And if you move your car, now you have to readjust the front bumper on every single shot. And that could take so much time to do depending on how much adjustments you have done. So what you have to do now with this method is just rotate however you want, and your environment will always be the same, like the car placement. So here we go. Now I'm just going to place it like this. So now that I have it placed to more or less how I like it, it's time to start actually bringing this scene to life. So first things first, open up the render menu, go to scene, turn on use Corona for the scene environment, click on none. Under maps, choose Corona bitmap. Now all you have to do is drag and drop it into a material slot. When this prompt comes up, click instance. This window will come up. Go to your backplate HDRI setup. I am using the 8K just like the one I'm giving away. So this way it's apples to apples. When this window comes up, I honestly I don't even know what I would do to play with it, so I just press OK and everything works great. So next is I go to my camera that I like for me to view to render. So make sure it's the one that you like. I lock it. This way, whenever I switch viewports, nothing changes. Now on the top right, I'm going to enable the Corona RT. So click on front view, extended viewports, Corona RT, or Corona Interactive. and then all I do is press on the window and it's going to start up the interactive mode. So because of the way I have my camera set up, I typically always use camera exposure. This is a habit I've developed from back in the day when camera exposure was very popular. And because I shoot all the time, I typically like to use it in real life. So my workflow hasn't changed. So for me to be able to use my camera exposure, normally all you have to do is, if you're using a real view or a physical camera or a physical camera, doesn't matter, make sure the basic photographic settings is checked, and now it works. So now we have a rough setup. So now it's time to dial it in. All we have to do is for the environment, under tiling, under U, do -1. This flips the HDRI inside out, which is necessary to do. And now after that, we just start more or less rotating it until our environment matches what the backplate is, or as close as possible. So here, I know my light source was back here. Now, when I shot the HDRI, I was kind of more centered. So really, if the light is back here, I kind of shot the HDRI right there. So it's not going to be apples to apples in terms of backplate and HDRI, but all you have to do is try to figure out where the hero light source is. And because this was the hero light source, as you can see, we're getting nice long shadows from it. So all you have to do is rotate the environment to kind of recreate what naturally would happen. And if we put a light source here as a test, so let me turn this off. So let's say we're doing a test to kind of get an idea of what would happen. So if we put a sphere right here where the HDRI sphere is, make like 500. Actually, probably right around there. So see how our shadows creep over to the right? So now all we have to do is make sure in our HDRI rotation that kind of happens. Now, there's always two ways you could look at it. One is for the reflections and one is for the lighting. Because this was a nighttime shot, there really isn't much happening. Like even if you look at the cars in the background, you don't really get that much in terms of reflections on them. It's just kind of a pinkish tonish sky, so, and a few hot spots from the neighborhood. All right, so with that said, just rotate this environment. And there we go. Now, and the other thing I do is typically I use the dome feature. So this allows me to get a little more precision out of the HDRI. So kind of like the layout, because if I make this shorter, as you can see, it affects the way the shadows behave. If I make it taller, the shadows change. So this gives me a little more freedom and precision control. So there's that. Rotate that. So that's kind of good. I'm happy with that. So now that we have that set up, it's time to implement the floor, the background, and more or less the rest of the shot. So yeah, we have this annoying little hotspot here, and that's really the reflection. So there's two ways you could rotate the environment to get rid of it, or you could fix it in post. It's really up to you. I think I'm just going to rotate the environment, and I don't mind it here because this is going to give me a pretty sexy lens flare, I think. If I turn on the flare ability, yep. So this nice little shimmer incorporates the environment element. Actually, I'll leave it like this. It's pretty nice. All right, so next thing on the list is to create the shadow catcher and the backplate. So I typically do two birds with one stone in a way. So what I do is Corona shadow catcher. For me, I always use transparent. I typically, my final render in 3D is what I start retouching, so I don't do the composite mode. But I have done it from time to time if I had to really control the shadows. In most cases, I don't. So then for the environment, you want to use Corona tone map control, uncheck these three, and then for input, go to bitmap, go to our HDRI folder, and 0135. Now what I do is I turn down the blur a lot. Go back. So now we have our shadow catcher. Drag and drop that on the floor, so now we have that. And now all I do is I turn on direct visibility override, and I drag this one right into here, instant, and now we have our environment set up. And the reason why I do it this way is now if let's say I'm doing a catalog or whatever, and I have a shadow catcher just like this, it's always consistent. All I have to do is go in and change the image once and it'll relink everything. It's just a matter of the whole logic of time is money, and if I could save minutes here, it helps speed up the workflow. So anyhow, we have that set up. Now it's time to actually put an environment around it. So what I'm going to do is go down to Global Volume Material and load up Corona Volume Material. And drag and drop that into the material slot. And so now we have to do add a little bit of distance to this. So I'm going to say 15 feet. So now as you can see, it really fills it all in. And so what we have to do is now scatter the light source. And that's where we change this right here. The brighter we go, the more we're allowing the light to diffuse inside the environment. Now I personally check single balance just to speed it up. Now we could play with some directionality. And now the last thing to do is to take away the fill. All you have to do is change this color. The brighter you go, the less fill you get. So if you go pure white, it's completely gone. If you go down a few notches, it keeps bringing it back in. And this, at this point, is just a matter of opinion, how much fill you personally want to add to your scene. So there's that. I'm gonna, let's say, put that much fill into it. So now what I have to do is, if you notice, if you look closely, we're getting these slight, where these lines are, this is where our environment and shadow catcher transition. And the game plan is, of course, to make it seamless, like it's all part of the same thing. So what you have to do is a little bit of modeling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this edge up, extend that ground out all the way, come over here, extend it up, extend it out, and all I'm doing is holding shift and dragging with the edge mode. So there we go. Now our ground feathered off. So as you can see, we have that. So the last thing we have is this crazy fog in the background. Now that is, again, a matter of opinion of how much fill you want. So if you're happy with how this looks and you really want to control the distance of the fog from the background to the foreground, you could certainly now leave it as it is, because you can see. And then if you change the distance, it'll get even crazier because it'll creep up more and more to the foreground. But at a certain point, you're going to see this line. And so if you do want to get rid of that line, this is how you can do it. Create a really large plane behind the car and move it really far in the distance, like so. Move it upward. Now I'm going to add some segments to it, like that. I'm just going to add a bend modifier. And bend it inward so it wraps around the car a little bit. And now just add your shadow catcher right to it. Now what this is going to do is it's going to help make that seamless transition. And so now all you could do, if you want, is model in a few of these elements to kind of change that depth, because what's going to happen is this is so far away, this is, and like the rest of it isn't, so you still aren't going to have a respectful sense of depth. So all you have to do to fix that, go to left view, create a square that represents the house, put that about right there. This, I'm flipping it, cutting it like so. And I'm not getting too crazy here, just enough to get the job done. And because I want real depth, I'm giving it real shape of the house. So this way, it does have a real sense of perspective and form. Now it's not going to be 100% accurate, so I'm going to tweak it like this. that, extend it outward. More. Move that all the way back. There we go. Now what we're going to do is leave this side kind of as is. We'll see what's going to happen. So again, throw the shadow catcher on it. So now we have that little foreground depth, so that's helping get rid of that line. And then if you do want to, you can kind of mirror this over to the other side and then tweak it slightly. See how it starts affecting it? So that's where the problem we're going to have now is the fact that our HDRI or our backplate has this light source, which I really wanted because I really wanted to play off of it. And what's happening is the shadow catcher is catching, so I'm going to leave that off. And so there we go. So there's that setup. So now what we could do is tweak this little distance just a little more and the fill of it. So there we go. Play with the scattering if you want, how much fog you actually want scattered in your environment. I'm a sucker for effects, so I'm going to put a buttload of fog into it. I mean, we're doing it for the fog, so might as well get it going. And this stuff, like, this is all subjective and opinion based. So when you play with this, you just do what you visually like. So now that that's done, we have our dramatic, boring setup. Now, I can't say boring. It has some drama to it. It has shape. It shows kind of like a moody teaser thing of the car. But what I personally like to do, and for this case, especially since we have fog to play with, is add my own light sources. So I'm going to add some light streaks as if cars drove by or something. There's multiple ways of doing it. You could take more or less a sphere, put a light material on it, and then animate it, add motion blur. You go nuts with it. What I'm going to do is make a little line. Edit poly. I'm going to go to connect. Add maybe like 30 to 100 segments. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of noise to it. And the reason why I'm doing this is if a car was driving by, they'd have a little bit of shake. Not a lot, but a little bit. So, like up and down, so something like this. There we go. So now we can see that line's not perfect. And now all I'm going to do is, so let's say if a car drove by, because this is a nice little stupid expensive car, they wouldn't drive by too close. They'd get a little safer distance. But we are part of the douchebag in the center of the road, so we're not earning any brownie points from the community here. So let's say someone was driving by. There we go. So they got a little off to the left side of the car. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a V-Ray light, or sorry, not V-Ray light, Corona light material on it. So here we go. Now I want this to be the tail lights of the vehicle. So I'm going to throw a little bit of red on there, apply it, uncheck occlude other lights. Now I'm going to do is click shadow catcher eliminator because I do want it to affect my shadow catcher. And then you give it a little directionality. So 0.4. Now I'm really going to crank it. So let's say 200. 0.45. So there we go. And now, as you can see, we're getting some nice little sexy trail. We're getting some nice little hot spot in the center, and it feathers off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that over to this side. As if another car drove by, now really pissing off the neighborhood. On this one, I'm going to change it to headlights. So I'm going to give it like a little cool tone. With that, now we're playing off the warms and cools of the environment. So we have that, and if a car was driving by, we'd see both headlights. The tail lights, chances are we're only going to see one, but the headlights, we are going to see both of them. And headlights are typically a little lower than the headlights. Whereas taillights, so we're gonna lower them a little bit like that. What we could actually do is even bump up the size of this. Let's go to 0.2. So there we go. So now that we have that, yep, shadow catch illuminator is on. So let's go to 150, tone it down just a notch. Now this again is very subjective. It's a matter of opinion of how much you want to add or keep. So there we go. Now what sometimes I do is if I'm noticing my shadows getting a little too much light in it, I play with the shadow amount on the shadow catcher. So now me adding 10, it helps, but then as you can see it takes away like the light implement. So you gotta find that balance of what you want and don't want. So what I'm gonna try to do is go back to 10 and then see if cranking this is gonna help bring it back. Yep, there we go. Alright. So now that we have that, we have some cool little effects. And now we can see if changing this stuff is going to help really bring back that awesome visual effect of fog. So yeah, see, now we're getting a lot of it. Now it's just a matter of finding that fine balance between too much and realistic amount. So there we go. There we go. So now we have some fog. We have some environment haze. I think I'll bring this back up a little bit. Let that really creep in. As you can see, this is just a little game of back and forth to find something that you like. Unfortunately, there's no perfect blueprint for it right off the bat. But that's the process of rendering in general, so. So there's that, and there's something I'm fairly happy with. I've got a nice little glow happening. This plays off nicely. Let's go to 800. It diffuses. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. I won't do it on the blue, but the red I kind of like what it did there. So there's that. If we go real black, see now we're getting a lot of fill from the fog. But we're not getting that natural environment. And it wasn't this foggy, I saw a lot more. So for it to be realistic, you gotta find that fine balance between too much and not enough fog. So something like this is good because you can see right where that light was. It certainly diffused it well, but I could see details back here, so I'm trying to keep it in the vague of realism. So the last thing you can do is you can turn on your headlights a little more. So I believe front lights, yep, so I'm going to turn those on more, and then this one, that's my little LED strip. pull that one off a little bit. So that way we have that. And as always, I love lens flares, so that has to be on. So we're going to diffuse the streaks a little more, add more of them. I'll probably crank this up. So there's that. And now what I do for my render elements, besides the obvious mask and all that, I always like to do a beauty and glare pass separate, so that way I can really play with it when compositing. So all you have to do is make sure when you add the beauty, you uncheck apply this, apply that. Denoise 0.65 as I typically use it for high quality 0.65. And that's that. Now just render and wait for the final. So there we go. I let this bake for about 30 minutes, and this is the final end result. We have some nice little diffusion happening from the light sources, a little glow happening, a little glare coming overhead from the fog, kind of blends over the front of the car, which helps incorporate it into the backplate more, which helps with realism. So yeah, overall that is one of my techniques. I will be doing another tutorial soon on same concept, but as if the backplate was strobed. So again, I'll use a model that's provided for free to the public, and I will also provide a backplate HDRI set to the public so everyone could follow, and at the end, more or less have apples to apples. So hopefully this helps someone, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.